Welcome back to Fresh Brew. These videos are our way at Wesleyan Sermons of trying to have a chance to have a little more of a just personal conversation about things that we might talk about if you and I were able to have coffee together. I have my own preaching growth partners that I meet with on a regular basis and just talk about what we're learning about preaching. We share books together. We talk about ministry and its interconnection with preaching together. And we have a deep friendship that I enjoy. I hope you have those kinds of relationships. And that's the idea behind this, is that if we were able to have that kind of conversation, these are the sort of things that might come up. A lot of times people ask me in those conversations what books I'm reading lately. My friends ask me that all the time. I ask that of my friends. But since I am focused on preaching with my whole life, my friends typically focus that on what books are you reading in the sphere of preaching that you have enjoyed lately. So I want to share one with you today. It's a book by an acquaintance and colleague of mine, Alice McKenzie. She's a delightful person, teaches down at Southern Methodist University. She's a consultant to Methodist pastors and is a sharp wit and is a very, very skilled teacher of preaching. Her book that I want to share with you is titled Preaching Proverbs. So if I was to just have coffee with you, I'd slide that book across the table and say, borrow it for a while, bring it back to me, tell me what you think. It's worth owning. One of the great sources of wisdom in the biblical texts, of course, is the book of Proverbs. Usually, though, when I see the book of Proverbs preached, the way it's preached is as a supporting statement for some other passage. You decide what you want to say from the passage, and then you jump to find a proverb that could add a little bit of something else, a little new flavor to your sermon, and you stick it in there, much like you would a quote from some other guru that you thought said something well. C.S. Lewis in the Chronicles of Narnia said, Proverbs are used that way, which is somewhat fitting to the way they were gathered, in that they were gathered all across the ancient Middle East and the wisdom literature of that time period, and they were filtered to find the most fitting and to place them in some sort of connection with each other to make a whole book of Proverbs styled as a king giving his son great guidance on how to live. But there's more to Proverbs, of course, than just being cultural quotations. There's so much more there. And preaching on the Proverbs, from the Proverbs, with what the Proverbs has to offer is an art that seems to have been diminished, perhaps even lost in many pulpits. So don't just preach on the Proverbs as an illustration. Pick up this book if you haven't yet and read through it. You won't agree with everything she says. I don't. You wouldn't agree with everything I would say, and vice versa. She is her own person, but read for what is most helpful to you. It's a fantastic book written by a preaching pastor who is also a preaching professor. She has a pastoral heart, but she knows how to teach preaching and how to consult with pastors who are working their way through preaching. So read it. It will be a fantastic guide to you in terms of what the literary genre of Proverbs is, the multiple types of Proverbs there are, the literary techniques that are employed and how you can interpret them. For example, equational parallelism or a contrasting parallelism, those sorts of things. You'll find that all through the text, but you'll also find cautionary words that are so important. There are uses of Proverbs that damage human beings, and we need to be careful of them, just like any biblical text can be abused. And there are misunderstandings of what Proverbs do. Proverbs don't make promises to people. They give you a condensed view of life. As Alice puts it, it gives you a spotlight to shine over the landscape of your life, a searchlight to find the settings in which it's most fitting and have wisdom for that appropriate setting. But you have to rove with that searchlight until you find the right setting of life for the proverb to apply to. If you haven't preached on Proverbs in a while, and you want to prepare a sermon series, get this book, read it from time to time on the side of your chair or as you have a few moments here and there in your office. And let that be part of your preparation. You'll be glad you did. Your sermons will be more faithful to the biblical text. You'll see things you would not have seen. You'll have sermon ideas you wouldn't have found otherwise. And most importantly, it'll give you a way of understanding and using and applying Proverbs for the rest of your, not just your ministry life, but your walk with Christ on this earth as well. That's a book I would recommend to you today if we were having coffee. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.